Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, now Pamela Anderson? Women getting to tell their own stories, tearing apart the ones written about them, is my favorite trend right now. Honestly, I wanted to know all about this documentary the second I saw it. And I've seen a lot of celebrity documentaries. Amy about Amy Winehouse might be my favorite, but there aren't a ton that go as far as Pamela: A Love Story. The revelations, trauma, and even tender moments are all so real that at times I felt a little uncomfortable getting that close to her life. I just needed to know why she would subject herself to that. For Anderson, this is just her moral philosophy. She vows to be vulnerable in all aspects of her life.
It's the only way to live life. Vulnerable.
And this was possibly the culmination of an entire life of Pam just going as hard as possible. Not that she doesn't have some lines. The producers really wanted her to be involved behind the scenes, but she refused. She knew that she'd be too tempted to edit herself. And honestly, relatable. That's also why it's not her voice reading the journal entries.
I'm glad I got this diary. It should really help. Maybe I'll write a book one day.
She would have been like, nope, not saying that, not saying that, not saying that. And 5 minutes later, the documentary is over.
Since you've given us your journals, are you open to reading them in the film?
I don't know if I want to go there and read them.
So what really struck me about the scenes with Pamela Anderson was how natural it felt, actually. Like, I seriously thought I was just sitting with her having a conversation about her life. And that was no accident. That was the whole idea. Like, she was staying at her grandmother's old home in Canada, and there was no reason to film it anywhere else. When it came time to actually film the documentary, Pamela was as down to earth as you'd imagine. She didn't want to do any of that Hollywood nonsense. You know Pam. She wanted to keep it as raw as possible. This is the woman who still dyes her own hair from boxes she gets at the drugstore BTW. She had no interest in letting other people do her makeup in her own home. She was gonna do it herself. So if you've seen it, you know now pretty much what it's like to hang out with Pam. And to think, the documentary almost didn't happen. So as we've covered, I love celebrity documentaries, but not everybody feels the same way. I think it's hilarious that one guy who really hates this genre is the very same director of Pamela: A Love Story, Ryan White. Like, he'd normally work on movies about highbrow subjects like the overturning of Prop 8 in California, or like the life of Frida Kelly, the secretary for the Beatles. So a documentary about a girl from Baywatch and Home Improvement was about the last thing he wanted to do. Enter Brandon Thomas Lee, who definitely has his mom's level of charisma. Now, he wanted to produce a movie about his mom, and Ryan White was the guy he wanted to take the job. Ryan assumed that Pamela was a low-class, self-obsessed Hollywood ditz. But my girl Pam showed him that she was actually a soulful, intelligent woman. She loved talking to him about his career and about life in general. What she wasn't interested in talking about was herself. And that's what sealed the deal for him to take the directing gig. Though she would not let him call her Pamela. It's mom or nothing, pal, no matter how big you get. If I were Pamela Anderson, I would have been shaken like crazy right before this premiere, but I'm not quite as tough as she is. So Vogue followed Anderson around, getting ready with her sons, and they all really opened up, joking around with each other and showing us another glimpse of their beautiful relationship. Actually watching it, yeah, totally different experience.
God, I'm scared. He's not naked, I hope.
As you can imagine, it was hard for Pamela to relive a lot of the traumas in her life, but it was much harder to see her sons see it. I would just start crying and never stop until the credits rolled. And while that was hard, what she really loved about the experience was getting to see some of her home movies with her kids. She hadn't seen them since the pair were just tiny. I mean, no one ever watches through all their home movies years later, who even has them anymore, am I right? Though there's one family member from those days that we haven't heard from. So my other big cue after this was what Tommy Lee thought of the whole thing. You know, how Sylvester Stallone and Tim Allen made a big deal about how much they rejected Pamela Anderson's stories about them.
I remember talking to Sylvester Stallone one time, and he offered me a condo and a Porsche to be his #1 girl, and I was like, does that mean there's #2?
Well, you wouldn't expect Tommy Lee to be the mature one, but plot twist. he is. He's on Team Pamela when it comes to her telling her story on her terms. Don't count on him to give a review, though. He's moved on now and has no interest in watching it himself. Though, considering how successful their story has been for Hulu and Netflix, I kinda think he's waiting for someone to offer him enough green for a Tommy Lee documentary. But honestly, I just want to doc about all those tattoos he's got. Like, it's not quite a lifetime of handwritten journals, but you gotta admit, they're pretty memorable. Okay, so like Pamela Anderson, can we be best friends now? You are actually a lot cooler than I thought.